Welcome to another episode of InRange. I'm in Wilcox, Arizona, standing at the corner of Maley and Railroad Avenue, right in front of what was the headquarters saloon that stood here until 1940. However, the building behind me is essentially a reproduction of that, built directly over the ruins of what burned down in 1940. That's not what's interesting about this, however. This location is where the youngest of the Earp brothers, Warren Earp, was killed in a gunfight, or one should say a one-sided gunfight, on July 6th, 1:30 a.m. in the year 1900. Pretty much right through these doors. So as I said, the original building did burn down in 1940. However, the structure behind me is built right over the superstructure of it, so it's identical in terms of dimensions and doorways. So we can still use this structure to really reproduce what happened that night. At 1 in the morning on July 6th, Warren Earp, the youngest of the Earp brothers, and someone that he had had some form of a relationship for a long time, Johnny Wyatt, walked through this door, having some form of an argument. Warren Earp at some point looked at Johnny and said, "I've heard you've been paid $100 to $150 to kill me. I have my gun, why don't you do it?" And Johnny said, "I don't have a gun and I don't want to fight with you." And Warren said to him, "You better get a gun." And Johnny Wyatt did exactly that. He walked out of this doorway right here, crossed the street to the Mercantile, picked up 2 guns from his friend and walked out the door. And his friend said, "Hey, what are you doing with those?" And Johnny said, "I'm gonna need these," and walked across the street back through these doors. Once he went through this doorway, Warren Earp was no longer there, and so he sort of calmed down and started just hanging out with the rest of the people who were there at right now around 1:20 in the morning. So let's explain the layout of this building. This is the main entrance right here on Railroad Avenue, and this would have gone into the saloon. And if we walk down Maley Avenue, you'll see that there are 2 doorways on the side of this building. It was a Flying Leaps Vineyards up until recently. It's now for lease. This side doorway also entered into the saloon, and then right past this brick area went into a restaurant through this doorway that is now here. However, these were connected. If you went through this doorway into the restaurant, there would be a wall right here and a doorway right here that you could enter into the saloon. And at 1:30 a.m., Warren Earp walked through these doors into the restaurant and started approaching into the saloon. So as I said, Warren Earp walked through those doors into the restaurant, and here is the saloon behind me, and Johnny Wyatt is at the end near the opening on Railroad Avenue. He looks up and sees Warren Earp coming through the restaurant, through the doorway on the inside, into the saloon. Knowing that Warren Earp had previously threatened his life and was now armed with 2 handguns, he fired 2 rounds at him. Warren Earp ducked through this doorway and then came back into the saloon through this doorway that's right here, which then brought them closer together and started walking this direction down the saloon, opening his coat and jeering at Johnny, essentially saying, "You're not going to kill me and I'm not armed." So this would have been the exact door frame that Johnny Wyatt was backing up to get away from Warren Earp after firing 4 shots. Now, one must think that those 4 shots were not actual misses, but intentional misses as warning shots, for lack of a better term. But at this point, Warren Earp continues to approach him with his jacket and his hands forward saying, "I'm not armed." And Johnny Wyatt says to him, "Don't come 1 inch closer." And Warren stepped 1 inch closer, and at that point, Johnny fired a shot that didn't miss. Right here, hitting him on his left side, going directly through his heart. Warren Earp fell on his face, dead instantly. Let's get into some of the possible reasons that this fight actually happened. Both Warren Earp and Johnny Wyatt worked for Henry Hooker at the Sierra Bonita Ranch, north of here, a giant ranching operation that's still there to this day. Now, Henry Hooker was friends with Wyatt Earp back during the Vendetta ride. And Warren Earp, the youngest of the Earp brothers, had been kind of a freeloader, ranging from town to town ever since the rest of the Earps left Arizona, getting into trouble with the law in multiple places and just evading it, and landing up here in Wilcox, Arizona. And Henry Hooker gave Warren Earp a job on the ranch, ostensibly just to get him out of trouble. Now, Warren liked to claim that he was the cattleman's detective for Henry Hooker and his ranching operations, but there's no evidence to that. It looks like he just had menial tasks around the ranch. Johnny Wyatt worked as a cowboy at the ranch, and that's how Warren and Johnny got to know one another. And that was years before this actual shooting happened. Now, it's very interesting that when this shooting happened and Warren was killed, Kate Elder, otherwise known as Big Nose Kate, Doc Holliday's girlfriend from the past, lived just 10 miles from here in Cochise, Arizona, helping maintain the Cochise Hotel. And she was well aware of the killing of the youngest Earp brother. And she didn't say much at the time. But in 1935, when she was getting close to passing away herself, living at the Arizona Pioneer Society home in Prescott, Arizona, she said something to a priest which was recorded. She said that Warren and Johnny had a, quote, unnatural relationship for men, implying that they were lovers. And the reality is that the entire burial of Warren Earp and the case being pushed through in one day and saying this is a self-defense shooting "You're good to go, Johnny," kind of also implies that the local community that didn't really care for Warren Earp and considered him a bully might have been aware of that relationship between the two of them and just didn't want to air all that, quote, dirty laundry. But the idea that Johnny had been hired by factions from the old days of the Vendetta Ride to rid Arizona of the rest of the Earps has no factual foundation. In fact, there's no proof of that whatsoever. The only proof we have of them being lovers is what Kate Elder said, although she knew the Earps real well, so her data is probably pretty useful, and the behavior of the community after the shooting, in which they got rid of someone they found to be a pest, Warren Earp, and didn't really want to talk about what the relationship was between Johnny and Warren. So this is the old Wilcox City Cemetery, right on the north end of the Wilcox Playa, which is a giant dry sand lake. And you can see that this place is desolate and fairly forgotten. Now, there's some interesting historic graves here, which are worth seeing. Now, it's been said that after Warren Earp was killed, the community didn't care that much, and they buried him in an unmarked grave. That's not to say that there's not a marker for Warren Earp here, though. Let's go look at what is here. You know, in 1890, 1900, 1910, during Arizona Territorial's efforts to become a state, the Earps were considered a problem. They were representative of the issues that plagued this territory. They were considered the fighting Earps, and they were, for the most part, they had friends, of course, but for the most part, they were seen as an example of the problems of this area, not the benefits. And so putting him in an unmarked grave and just calling it a day really makes a lot of sense based on the feelings of the time. So what happened was books started coming out after Wyatt Earp died, you know, Frontier Marshal, Tombstone, and Iliad of the Southwest, and they started playing out the fantasy, the Hollywood version, for lack of a better term, of the narrative, not the actual reality of the events, which is what I try to present to you here on this channel. So Warren Earp's grave went unmarked for a very long time. Then we start getting into the 1990s and we see a renaissance of a couple movies. We see Tombstone, which of course is a very excellent and enjoyable film, if not a historically accurate one. Wyatt Earp by Kevin Costner, and all that in 1993, I believe. And there's a renaissance, for lack of a better term, of Earp mania. Earp is seen as this diligent lawman, and their whole Earp family is seen as this valiant frontier family that was forging its way through the criminality of the West. Somewhere around 2000 or so, you see this marker appear, and clearly it's modern because it's tacky art, for lack of a better term, does not represent any of the graves in this cemetery, and its size and prominence based on who this is for, based on the other graves that are in the cemetery, is also greatly disproportionate. It's proportionate. But if there's anything about this that can represent to you the reality of Earp mania and the fantasy versus the reality, it's this grave marker. Because here's the grave marker, and as I said, it's rather tacky, but here's the crazy part of this, and you can't make this up. This grave marker, or memorial, is an advertisement for a book. Michael Hickey's A Closer Look, which is a book about Warren Earp, filled with all sorts of conspiracy theories about the cowboy clan and etc. But here you go, an unmarked grave for a fairly unremarkable person turned into a huge monument to sell a book based on legend and lore. Wilcox is famous for a lot of things, actually, and has a lot of very interesting historical moments throughout the Old West. And in 2021, the town looks a little rough for the wear. The best maintained building here on the street is the Rex Allen Museum, directly across the street from the statue of Rex Allen I'm standing in front of right now. Rex Allen was a very famous cowboy western singer. As a young boy, he sung at barbershops down this main street. And as he got older, he landed up penning the song The Streets of Laredo, of which many of you are probably very familiar with, and made many hits in the country western music industry. He also starred in 39 episodes of Frontier Doctor, a 1950s serial drama on TV, and was a chief narrator for the Disney Corporation for both westerns and nature films. So unfortunately in 1999, Rex Allen died in Tucson, Arizona. He had a heart attack in his driveway and collapsed in it, and his caregiver drove over him with a truck, securing his demise. Now, at this point, I have to do my normal call out. InRange is a Patreon supported project only. We are completely viewer supported. No sponsors, no overlords, no advertising. And so if you'd like to consider keeping this kind of content on the internet, please consider supporting us. But what I do want to do is show you an example of the kind of music Rex Allen was famous for, and I'm going to go ahead and end this video with one of his songs.
Ma and Pa was so darn sore they woke me up one night. There was some awful cussing. Ma said Pa was right. They was a waiting Sister Bess who never kept her word. The sun came up as Bess came in, and this here's what I heard. Slap her down again, Pa, slap her down again. Make her tell us more, Pa, tell us where she's been. We don't want her neighbors talking about her kin. Slap her down again, Pa, slap her down again. Poor old Bess got so darn mad she ran away one day to meet that traveling salesman with city slicking ways. We run and stood beside the road with shotguns by our side. Me and Deacon, Pa, and Ma, who yelled as they come by. Slap her down again, Pa, slap her down again. Make her tell us more, Pa, tell us where she's been. We don't want her neighbors talking about her kin. Slap her down again, Pa, slap her down again. Oh, yes, they slap my sister Bessie. They sure did slap, slap, slap her on the chin. Oh, yes, they slap my sister Bessie. When she got down, she couldn't get up, couldn't get up, couldn't get up again. Ma and Pa, they planned for Bess to marry Deacon Brown and not that traveling salesman who always come around. They made poor Bessie go to church, her face is mighty red. The deacon took one look at her and this here's what he said. Slap her down again, Pa, slap her down again. Make her tell us more, Pa, tell us where she's been. We don't want her neighbors talking about her kin. Slap her down again, Pa, slap her down again. Oh, yes, they slap my sister Bessie. They sure did slap, slap, slap her on the chin. Oh, yes, they slap my sister Bessie. When she got down, she couldn't get up, couldn't get up, couldn't get up again.